Welcome to Black History Matters 2022, presented by the National Abolition Hall of Fame and Museum, also known as NAHOF, located in Peterborough, New York. Black History Matters is an educational series that seeks to highlight historical events and the Black American experience. This series consists of 28 videos that NAHOF will release daily through the month of February 2022. Videos are viewable on NAHOF's website. The mission of the National Abolition Hall of Fame and Museum is to honor anti-slavery abolitionists, their work to end slavery, and the legacy of that struggle, and strive to complete the second and ongoing abolition, the moral conviction to end racism. This program was funded in part by Humanities New York, with support from the National Endowment for the Humanities. Any views, findings, conclusions, or recommendations expressed in this program do not necessarily represent those of the National Endowment for the Humanities. It is now my pleasure to introduce today's presenter, Cameron Patterson. Cameron Patterson is the Executive Director of the Robert Russa Moton Museum, a National Historic Landmark that preserves and interprets the history of civil rights and education, specifically as it relates to Prince Edward County and its citizens' role in America's transition from segregation towards integration. Since joining Moton in January of 2017, Cameron has led efforts to grow staffing support, increase Moton's presence across the Commonwealth, solidify a thriving partnership with Longwood University, increase programs, and expand resources for young visitors. Professionally, Cameron is actively involved as a member of the Virginia Museum Association and the American Association for State and Local History, where he promotes museum advocacy efforts at all levels of government. Before joining Moton, Cameron worked in numerous roles with student affairs at Longwood University. Recently, Cameron was appointed by Governor Ralph S. Northam to serve as a member of the Virginia African American Advisory Board. Cameron also serves as a member of the State Board of Directors for the Virginia Center for Inclusive Communities, Vice Chairman for the Farmville Area Chamber of Commerce, Vice Chairman for the Farmville Planning Commission, and Prince Edward Christmas Mother Board member. A Lynchburg, Virginia native, he graduated from Longwood University with a Bachelor of Science in History and a Master's in Counselor Education. Without further ado, welcome to today's presentation.
So I've had the great fortune of serving in my role here at the Moton Museum since 2017. Prior to serving in this role at Moton, I've worked in higher education at Longwood University in a number of different roles, working in the Multicultural Affairs Office, working in the Accessibility Resources Office. And so I've always felt that my career has been focused on, bringing awareness to individuals as it relates to issues of educational equality. And so now I'm just very fortunate to have the opportunity to do that work in this role, leading this historic civil rights museum here in Farmville, Virginia. Here at the Moton Museum, I was really inspired by the story that this museum promotes and shares. Being someone that has spent a great deal of time in the Farmville and Prince Edward County community, I have gotten to know many individuals impacted by this history, whether it is individuals that went on strike in 1951 alongside Barbara Johns, or whether it's individuals that have been impacted by the closing of public schools here in Prince Edward. So those connections inspired me to want to work at this historic place. And, being here at this museum, and really, museums in general, they give you an opportunity to connect with the community around you. And so I really love the external facing part of this job, the ability to get out, to connect, to build relationships, and to really let folks know that, as much as this is a museum that's about promoting a particular story, this is also a community that is meant to be an anchor for the community in which we live. So I've enjoyed this opportunity and have been very grateful for it. Yeah, that's one of the neat things about um, this place is the story in which it is the story of how this museum was founded. As you mentioned, we are located in the former Robert Russa Moton High School. This building is now a museum and a National Historic Landmark. And I think the story in which this museum was founded really represents a renewed wave of civic activism within this local community. The museum was founded by a group of women known as the Martha E. Forrester Council of Women. And that group plays a significant role in the history of this civil rights journey within Prince Edward County. The Martha E. Forrester Council for Women was formerly known as the Council for Colored Women, led by Martha E. Forrester. It was that group of women in the 20s and 30s and on up through the founding of the museum that really fought to promote educational equality and opportunity for Black students here in Prince Edward County. So they advocated to ensure that Black students had the appropriate resources at a time in which the county was not doing right by the Black citizens of Prince Edward County. And so to bring that present day and have the Martha E. Forrester Council for Women be involved in the founding of the museum, I think that is such a powerful part of our story in the work that we've been able to do. So the Martha E. Forrester Council of Women led the fight to purchase this building from the county of Prince Edward. I think at that time there was thought by many members in this community that if you put this story, this history out of mind, out of sight, that it would be a good thing not to remember the past. And so the Martha E. Forrester Council led that fight to purchase this building. They established the Robert Russa Moton Museum. They helped to lead the fight for our National Historic Landmark status. And we celebrated in 2021 our 20th anniversary of being open to the public. We opened to the public in 2001 on the 50th anniversary of the Moton Student Strike. So the Martha E. Forrester Council, an important part of our history, of our founding as a museum. Yeah, so that's a good point. It's been a very challenging 2-year period or 2+ year period at this point for the museum community broadly. We have certainly seen many of our museum communities across the country have to adapt and make adjustments to the work that they're doing to find new creative avenues for program delivery. And Moton is no stranger to having to do that. I'm very proud of the way in which the museum here at Moton has been able to make that pivot. We immediately, as so many others did, recognize the importance of digital programming as an opportunity to continue engagement and to really open ourselves up to discovering new audiences of individuals to share this story with. So we have been able to create virtual tour opportunities for engagement with our K-12 audience, particularly. We have been able to thankfully receive an NEH grant in 2020 that really allowed us to create a digital version of our permanent exhibit, Moton School Story, Children of Courage. We have worked to take all of the signature programming that we were doing and create a hybrid element to that programming, which has really opened ourselves up to be able to engage with the broader community. And I think we're working as well to create new program opportunities as well. We are finding ways through an event that we did last year called Moton Live to really create that digital engagement, which I think has opened us up to be able to share this story more broadly. Just an example of that, we went from engaging with about 12,000 individuals pre-COVID to now engaging with over 20,000 individuals through the work that we do. And I think that is a testament to the creativity and the resilience of the staff and volunteers here at the museum. So that's a great question. One of the blessings of working at a museum like the one here at Moton is that for myself, our staff, we have the opportunity to work alongside those that were impacted by this history. So that is a blessing and something that we cherish very greatly. And so when you have that opportunity, you really get to hear the stories and you really get to understand firsthand what the experience was like for those that attended school here. And so just a little bit, as we set and frame what we refer to as the Moton story, it really begins in the permanent exhibit experience here at the Moton Museum, begins with the student walkout in 1951. So the student body here at the Robert Russa Moton High School walked out in protest of unequal facilities. The result of that student walkout was a school desegregation lawsuit, Davis versus County School Board of Prince Edward, which would become a part of the 1954 U.S. Supreme Court decision, Brown v. Board of Education. And so Brown v. Board famously concluded that in the field of public education, the doctrine of separate but equal has no place. And so Prince Edward would produce nearly 70% of the plaintiffs in that historic Brown decision, as well as, it was the only student initiated of the cases that would come together to formulate Brown. And so it was the unequal facilities here at Robert R. Moton that the students were protesting against. And so the students here that we are fortunate to still work alongside, they mention the lack of facilities compared to the all-white schools here in Prince Edward. They mentioned that they didn't have a dedicated gymnasium. They didn't have a dedicated cafeteria. They had one science classroom, and the only microscope was the one that the teacher had. And so if you were a student in the science class, you had to gather around the teacher to lay witness to the demonstrations that he or she would give on that one microscope. And so these are the things that the students make mention of that they were up against compared to their white counterparts. Barbara Johns, the 16-year-old student that would lead that student walkout here at Moton, makes mention of traveling across the Commonwealth of Virginia, participating in school-related activities. And she would see the other all-Black high schools and communities such as Lawrenceville, such as King George, and other places. And she would even see that those schools were far advanced than what they had here in Prince Edward County. And so it became a recognition that when you are faced with these challenges, when you recognize that no one is listening, they recognize that the school board, the board of supervisors, and other white leaders were not listening to what they were saying by way of these inadequacies, then you kind of recognize that you have to take action into your own hands. And that's exactly what these students would do as it relates to that student walkout on April 23rd of 51. We celebrated last year the 70th anniversary of that student walkout that would lead to the Brown v. Board of Education decision. Yeah, that's a good question. If I had to sum it up, I would say that this story is one of ordinary citizens using the levers of democracy to create change. And so for the students here in Prince Edward, for the community members here in Prince Edward, it was the legal system that they utilized as their way to go about creating change. And as much as we talk about that student strike generation, we also have a generation of individuals that were impacted by the public school closings here in Prince Edward that lasted for 5 years between 1959 and 1964. And they were also, folks that were active citizens who were really working to not only regain that educational opportunity here in Prince Edward, but really, in my mind, working to save that for the entire country. And so it really is a story of ordinary citizens using the levers of democracy to create change. Yeah, so it was really an extraordinary example of grassroots activism during the time in which public schools were closed here in Prince Edward County between 1959 and 1964. And I'll just give you some examples of ways in which folks came together to support students. We know the school closings impact all students, white and Black, but we also know that it disproportionately impacts Black students. There was a private academy that opened that white families had the opportunity to attend, but even some of those families were not able to afford that opportunity. But as it relates to what was done for the Black community here in Prince Edward, So there's great example of this grassroots activism that emerges when schools close in Prince Edward. One example of that was Reverend L. Francis Griffin, who was a local minister at First Baptist Church and president of the Prince Edward County Christian Association that organized training centers in the county. He says in a quote, "We're not trying to locate all the children in Prince Edward. We are trying to give some of them an opportunity. At the same time, we are not trying to lighten the burden of responsible authorities by relieving them of their obligation to give every child a free public education." And so, recognizing that public schools were closed, those training centers came about in different parts of the county to provide opportunity for students. But Reverend Griffin wanted to be very certain that folks did not think of them as a replacement to the public education that these citizens truly deserved, that the county was not giving them. So that's an example of a grassroots effort. There was also an example of the Episcopal Church, the AME Church, coming together. Kittrell Junior College in North Carolina opened its doors to sophomores, juniors, and seniors to ensure that they were able to continue with their academic study and not be impacted as they were so close and so near to graduation. So that's an example of an effort that comes together. Students would have the opportunity to be placed with families across the state, outside of the state. But most students, most Black families particularly, stayed in the county and went without a formal public education during this time period. But there were certainly some great examples of grassroots efforts that come together in support of these students during this time period. Yeah, I mean, one of the neat things about the work here at the museum is that we are constantly documenting the stories of individuals impacted by the school closings and students that participated in the student walkout. This semester, we are engaging in what we call our Storytellers Magazine project. We are working to put together the 5th volume of this effort. And it really has been a project that we work with students from Longwood University to document the stories of those impacted by the school closings. And so through those stories, you get to understand what these students did during the time in which schools were closed. And the school closings period is different because individuals did different things based upon the opportunities that were available. And so it becomes this rich collection of firsthand account through this Storytellers project that really gives you some deepened insight into what was happening with these students and families during this time period. Yeah, we are, very fortunate that here in this community, we have been able to build a museum that tells this critical story in American history. I often will say that you cannot talk about the modern civil rights movement without first understanding what happens here in Prince Edward County. It is an important story of how a community and students come together to challenge the inequalities around them. It is an example of how the actions of a community lead to two monumental Supreme Court cases. First, Brown v. Board of Education, the decision that comes down in 1954. And then secondly, the Griffin versus County School Board of Prince Edward decision in 1964 that reopens public schools in this county. So we're proud to tell that story. We are proud to take a story that is rooted in the past and let it provide lessons and examples of issues that we face even present day as we navigate and deal with particular issues in our societies and communities. And so we're just very thankful to have this rich resource. And we are excited when folks have the opportunity to engage with the work that we're doing and to come to understand the story of what happened here. Our website is a great place to continue that learning, motonmuseum.org. Under the Learn tab, we have a number of great resources, including that Storytellers Magazine project that I mentioned. Also, if you go to motonschoolstory.org, that is the digital site that we have built to accompany the permanent exhibit that we have on site, Moton School Story, Children of Courage. And I'm so grateful and thankful for the opportunity to share just a little bit, just to whet the palate just a little bit as it relates to Prince Edward history.
Thank you, Cameron, for your contribution to our program. I know our audience has learned immensely from your knowledge and gained a truer understanding of how ordinary people can push for extraordinary change and progress. Just as a reminder, do check out the Moton Museum story exhibits and learning material available at the Moton Museum website. Additionally, please help us by completing a brief survey available at the link on your screen and also in the video description box. Your feedback will help NAHOF receive funding and help plan future projects. Also, please contact NAHOF with any questions and if you are interested in learning more about the organization and its work. Once again, thank you, Cameron, for donating your time and contributing to this program. And thank you, the audience, for joining us on this educational journey, Black History Matters. We hope to see you at our next presentation.